So thanks a lot to the Green Note for having us. Woo. Yeah, okay, so let's start. Let me just give you a brief, I don't want to keep it formal, so stop me at any moment. As I said, it's a get-together, so really, but I've got everything laid out as if we were thousands, so expect fireworks. Oh. I think a nice introduction to what the Roosevelt movement is. Can start by talking about Eleanor Roosevelt's dream that was written down in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights of 1948. After the Second World War, after big conflicts, usually there is a desire for people to come together, fight inequalities, and fight injustice, and build a better society. And that is the dream that she put down in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. But after 7 years, we see that unfortunately, there is a bit of an anti-democratic involution. We see that the United States have killed their own dreams by polarizing their own society. They don't have anymore the large middle class that they used to have. They've got a very few rich and a lot of poor people. In Russia, we went over communism. There was meant to be democracy, and now we see there is an oligarchy in Russia. We see that even in China, again, you know, they became a capitalist country, but with a communist society, and that translated into slavery, basically. And even in Europe, where we had the Spinelli's dream of a united Europe made of people's culture, now we see that we've got a European Union where there is no real parliament, because there is an unelected commission that actually decides the laws. So there is a bit of an involution in the idea of democracy that we had after the Second World War. And hello.
Sorry to interrupt.
That's all right. What we think, what we keep on praising everywhere, is that if we want to create a society based on the Roosevelt's for freedom, the freedom of speech, freedom of worship, freedom from want, and therefore from need, and freedom from fear, we need to understand what the real powers that make up society are. And therefore the whole of the Roosevelt movement was born out of the knowledge that there are layers of power that nobody really talks about. And this is what we're going to be talking about today. What are the different powers that actually drive society forward? And of course today we're going to focus, because we've got Ahmad here today, so we're going to focus on a specific part of the world. We're going to be talking about Syria in particular, and we're going to be talking about the Syrian story. Before starting, I think what we're going to be doing today is to watch a few videos, just to give us a bit of a background into what mainstream media say about Syria. Then we're going to have Ahmad talking about his own experience, and also we've got a friend here, Simon, who's a member of the Roosevelt movement, who's got his parents still in Syria. So again, another witness of what's happening there. And then the idea is also to be talking about what our interpretation of what's happening in Syria is. So let's have a look at this video.
Blue, like the cloudless sky on the sun-filled day, soft, like the sleeping child in the rocking cradle, voice like the sounds of grief, thought, her gritted teeth, coffin, like the skeleton carried in my darkest, deepest sleep, dream, like the birth of my child with a new mother tongue, fear, like the carrying a heaviness over endless of fatigue, hope, like arriving in my home when my tears are my own. This is a refugee in the jungle.
The jungle is just like, what can I say, just like an animal place. You do not expect someone to live there. because it's too cold, there is no much clothes, there is no much food. It's difficult to live there.
This is the camp in Calais, known as the Jungle, currently home to over 7,000 refugees. When we first visited, the news was full of negativity around it, using dehumanising words like swarms and marauding migrants to describe the people there. Who are these people? What has happened to them? Where are they from? Where do they want to go? We decided to make the short journey across the channel to meet the humans behind the headlines. Back in England, emotional and confused by the conflicting news reports in relation to the reality, we wrote about our trip on Facebook. The response was phenomenal. We continued to visit the camp, getting to know the incredible people who have found themselves trapped there. Calais has been home to thousands of refugees for many years. Stuck at the border of the UK with no legal way of entering and seeking asylum, they continually make life-threatening attempts to cross the channel. The jungle began in the woods around the town. Refugees lived in makeshift shelters or slept in the streets of Calais. Late in 2014, the French state opened the Jules Ferry Centre on the edge of Calais, where one hot meal is handed out per day. The centre has space to sleep 150 women and children, and the other refugees set up camp around it. This brings us to today, a 7,000 people strong slum, barely tolerated by police, who can destroy parts of the camp with no warning, despite the people living there trying to survive. The jungle is constantly growing and expanding. Its residents made up of entrepreneurs, lawyers, doctors, architects, engineers, and more. This is Maya.
Let's go.
She has been working tirelessly in the jungle for over a year.
Well, my name is Maya, but many of the refugees call me the queen of the jungle. At least they used to. Now the jungle has gotten really big and not everybody knows me as the queen of the jungle anymore. But I like that name. Worm, worm! It's good, huh? Ooh. Huh. Look, they started putting areas for trash. These are the water points. Happy place to wash. Look, bakery. This is the Afghan area. The Afghans are the business people. Pakistanis too, but Afghans are mostly the business people. They are the ones who have all the grocery stores and all the restaurants. This is my best friend's cafe, Kabul Cafe. Everybody's got a generator now. Everybody's got light inside their stores. And all of this was done by the refugees. And then there's artists who come and do painting. Look at the fancy water points we have now, thanks to Acted. No, this is not the city that does that. It's just non-profit organizations. One of the mosques, I think 7 mosques, 2 churches. And welcome to the mud. This is gonna be muddy all winter long. It gets really bad, you know? So here actually we were in the Eritrean Ethiopian area, and now we're entering the Kurdish area, and that's where there's many families as well. Look at that, they tried to dry their clothes, you know, in this weather. Good luck. In a sense, you almost have the best and the worst, because it is a horrible place, but at the same time, there's a human spirit that's absolutely incredible. I feel like I've never been in a place where I've received so much love. I gave a lot of it, and now I'm receiving so much. So the church is an Orthodox church, Ethiopian. The first church that they built here was a very small church, and it was adorable. But it burned 2 weeks after it was inaugurated. A candle was left on, and it caught on fire, and in 15 minutes there was nothing left. But they decided to rebuild it bigger, and it took a tremendous amount of wood. They're constantly improving it. I haven't been here in a while, and they put this new painting. It's beautiful. Now you have a Winnie the Pooh rug to come in, which is, you know, that's jungle. First you walk on Winnie the Pooh, and then you go into the church. If you see the frame, you know, I mean, they did that with all sorts of different pieces of wood. They know what they're doing. And they did that with You know what? A saw and a bunch of nails. On Sunday, when all the women are dressed in white and lead the singing, it's absolutely amazing. Out there we have Sudanese, way out there we have Syrians. They congregate by nationalities. It's normal, you know, we all do that. Those cultures are incredibly different. They don't live the same way. The Afghans and the Pakistanis, they get along quite well. They're the business people. They're the ones that have the stores. They're the ones that have the restaurants. The Sudanese are completely different. They like to organize themselves in small communities of 15, 20 people, and they cook together, they support each other, they look out for each other, but they're not business people. There is not a single Sudanese that has a store. The Syrians, they don't want to have stores. All they think about is going to England. They don't want to settle like that.
Our friends in the camp shared many traumatic stories. However, concerns were high about the sensitive topics of which they spoke, so many wished not to have their identities disclosed. From ethnic cleansing and genocide in Sudan, to ISIS control and torture in Syria, from war and conflict in Afghanistan to corrupt government control in Eritrea, what people told us was hard to comprehend.
We left Afghanistan because of war, you know. Since 42 years we've been fighting in Afghanistan.
I can't live in this country because war, because bad political government.
It's not safe for me. When I was a kid, in my country you cannot pray, you cannot believe your Pentecost, not allowed, no church. When I was 17, I go for soldier boy.
Some Malaysian Janjaweed come by land cruisers and enter at night to my village and tell us this land is not for you. The African tribe have no any land here. This is just for Arabian tribe. After that, tell us to morning. Until to morning, if you don't left, you will see what we shall do. We left the village, and 3 children died, and their mother died.
My mother have been tortured in my country, and the children that they died while the airplane of the government bombed the village in the night, and I see the children died.
We are not safe. That's why we left the country. If we safe, we never gonna left the country, you know. Yeah, I had to leave. That's why, you know.
All people we see here, they have something push them to move out. All of us, we travel by roadway. No one can tell you that he landed by plane. Somebody landed by plane can be here. All you see here, they don't have people.
It's very dangerous. Many terrorists is there. Many friends, they dead in deserts. Many.
We all the way, we're walking about 12,000 miles from there to here. By walk and train and the mountain and the boat. The difficult time was from Turkey to Greek. 54 hours was in a boat. There was no food, no water. The boat was only for 30 person, but they put about 65 or 64. We never thought we were gonna be alive, you know. We all said we all die, we're gonna die, you know. Because we only see the sky, nothing else. No humans, not mountain, nothing.
Finally in Calais, after months, sometimes years of struggle, many people are devastated by what they find.
The life here in the camp is very difficult and it's very, very, very dangerous. Sometimes our friends, our sisters, our brothers died on the tunnel station.
All human is same. They are European, they are from Afghanistan, they are from Iran. They are same. So everybody need for a good life, for good buildings, cars, shops, fabrica, schools, electrics, university.
It's challenging, big challenges. It's different. Back in home, we have war, we have everything. Yeah? But when I come here, when I come in Europe, I'm never expected to like this place. Jungle is not for us, it's for animals.
We were repeatedly shocked to hear what people had gone through to make it to Calais. But for many, the journey was not yet over. Life in France is hard. The system for asylum seekers is stretched and slow. People spend up to 2 years waiting to be processed. In the meantime, unable to work. The only option is life in the jungle. For this reason, many dream of life in the UK. Why do you want to go to England?
We have a lot of reasons. For example, like language is our reason.
One of thing, language for me. Second thing, in London, the English government, they have support with the refugees. I want to continue my university education.
It is better than to stay here, to be in England than to stay here. The French government is doing too much violence for us, so I can't stay here anymore.
I want to say for the peoples of England, we are a peaceful peoples. We are a good peoples.
One of our good friends in the camp was a 29-year-old Eritrean man called Adam. One day we received a phone call from him. "I'm in Liverpool," he told us. Knowing he would have arrived with only the clothes on his back, we decided to visit him and bring him the supplies he needed.
It is 38, isn't it? Yeah! Oh, I'm so happy to see you! You got a coat?
Oh my God, thank you very much. Thank you. I'm very happy. Oh my God.
Everything you need, like...
So much, yeah.
You're size 40, yeah?
Yeah. Thank you very
Smart
much.
shoes.
I'm becoming Englishman. Yeah. Yes, very nice.
Good?
Good. Yeah. Oh my God. This is worthy.
Yeah?
Yeah, I like it very much. Thank you. God bless you. I prepared a lunch for you and for me.
You've already made lunch?
Yeah, of course.
First saved message received.
At the end of a long drive home, we had a voicemail from Adam.
Hello, Jasmine. How do you arrive your home? I would like to say thank you to God. I hope you arrive at your home safely. Thank you. See you. Bye-bye.
Unfortunately, not everyone is as lucky as Adam.
In 9 months, we went from virgin land to the biggest slum in Europe. Who knows what's going to become of this place? We don't know, because it's not a real town. The government said the people will be tolerated here, which means when they stop tolerating the people, who knows what they're going to do? None of the 6,000 people who live here have heat in their little shelter, and they still sing. This is really the human spirit. Look, they live in the mud, they have no heat, they don't know what their life is going to be, they cannot go to the place where they want to go in England, and they still sing.
For the people who are still in the jungle, conditions continue to worsen. The winter is harsh and many don't have the right clothing or shelter to protect them from the cold. The French government have recently begun building an official refugee camp, expected to open in early 2016, with the capacity to house only 1,500 people. While this may sound like a good solution, it does not account for the thousands of people who will not be accommodated in this new camp. The jungle is unique, a natural refugee camp where people from all over the world live alongside one another after fleeing some of the worst situations across the globe today.
دور حديد مني الشال زول البريد.
Okay, so why have we shown that? And first of all, thanks to the Worldwide Tribe for doing that documentary, and the O'Hara brothers, one of the two worked with me. He's gone down and has done this documentary. And actually, he called me yesterday. He was meant to come today, but apparently they are thinking about getting rid of the camp. So he had to go down and try with a number of other people and try and do something for not making that happen. Anyway, there is something that has stricken me of this video, which is where they say Syrians are not staying, they do not want to settle here, they want to go to England. And I think there is some reasons to that, and then Ahmad will tell me better, but I think there are some difference in the type of society that we had in Syria. So very briefly, I would like to show you just a little bit of Damascus before war.
بتوقع روحت انا ايه مع حمول يعني تبالي
لسه في معي لسه اخوي بتحمل للارض.
الله اكبر الله اكبر الله اكبر قذائف 22 جدا 17 يبرو 17 5 2013 الله اكبر الله اكبر الله اكبر الله اكبر الله اكبر
يا لطيف يا لطيف الله اكبر الله اكبر القنابل الفوسفوري تاهك تاهك تاهك.
The point that I'm trying to make is that Syria was not like a lot of other countries that are in Africa that have lived war throughout the past decades. It's a country that was living in peace, and there were peaceful demonstrations that were probably exploited by someone to create a situation of instability. Now we're going to analyze what we think happened. We're going to ask whether Ahmad can tell us what he thinks about our point of view if he wants to stay. But I think this is the time to hear Ahmad's story, so that he can tell us what happened better than I can.
Thank you.
Just whatever, just because of that.
If you just say that. Okay. Sorry. Yeah. I feel like the elephant in the room, you know. So, thank you. To start with, my name is Ahmad. I'm Syrian and I'm Kurdish. So I came to the UK about a year ago. I'm 25 years old. I'm 26 years old now. Before the war in Syria, before 2011, Syria used to be one of the most beautiful countries in the Middle East. We had a very good education system, a very good health system in that country. We've had tourists from all over the globe, coming to that country. We're very rich in history, very generous people, very talented, intelligent people. Sadly, things started changing after the Arab Spring. Things started changing. It started all in Tunisia. In Syria, at that time, things were quite normal. We never thought, even me as a Syrian, we never ever thought that the change will come to my country, because we've been living under the same regime, the same family for over 4 decades, in that country. Then things went from from Tunisia to Libya, then from Libya to Egypt. We knew that the wind is coming, and the wind is coming eastwards, which means that it will reach Syria sooner or later. 2011, the peaceful protest started in Syria. They were quite peaceful at that time. At the beginning, it started with doctors, engineers, students, going out to the streets and protesting against the regime. They did not want, at the beginning, they didn't want to topple the Assad regime. This was not the hope. This was not what they were looking for. They just wanted like some reform, like political reform, economical reform. But sadly, things went too wrong at that time, and things started to change. From a peaceful protest, it turned into be later on what is considered one of the biggest humanitarian crises since World War II. Today in Syria, according to the recent figures from Stefan de Mistura, the UN Special Convoy to Syria, there are over 7.5 million people are internally displaced. Over 5 million people are taking refuge in the neighboring countries, and over 500,000 people killed, and over 1 million people that are injured, and over 3 million children out of school today in that country. This all happened in the last 5 years. Sometimes I had a friend or people ask me, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Well, I tell them, look what happened in the last 5 years, Awful situation. It was a very difficult situation. We never thought that it will happen like this. We never thought that it will lead to a situation like this. Back in Aleppo, in 2011, and before that, I was a student. I was studying English. I was a student. I had friends, so go to university, hang out with friends, go to the cinema, music, just enjoy life. Things started changing in my town after 2011. Late 2012, my town was, Eastern Aleppo, was under siege from both conflict parties. Because we're coming from a Syrian Kurdish background, the town was Kurdish. So the Assad regime and the militia supporting Assad, they accused us of being separatists, of being PKK supporters, of being terrorists, that we want to separate from Syria, that we want our own government, our own Kurdistan. On the other side, the radical elements of the Syrian opposition, like ISIS, Jabhat al-Nusra, they accused us of being non-believers, of being infidels, So at that time, the town was under siege for quite, less than 3 weeks.
You were down there?
I was there. Friends were there, and at that time there were young people. They just started defending their town against these strangers. What happened at the time? After 3 weeks, young people, they took up arms. They didn't know how to fight. They didn't know how to shoot, but they were defending their town. After 3 weeks, they ran out of ammunition. They ran out of everything, and eventually ISIS, they managed to break the siege. Take control of the town. What happened? They brought, after they took control of the town, they brought the people, the young people who were, resisting. They brought them to the main square of the town, and they brought the women and children and everyone to the main square of the town. They brought some young people to the main stage of the main square of the town, and what they did there, they beheaded them. They put their heads on the main entrance of the town. They forced mothers, they forced children to watch this. I was hiding at that time because I was wanted. I spoke English, I was criticizing them on the social media. My mother came to me and said, please leave. Please leave, because you're wanted. They won't allow you to stay alive. So I said, I'm not gonna leave. They said, please. She started bleeding. She just, please leave. I said, okay, I'll leave. So I thought eventually I'll leave for 1-2 weeks till the situation gets better in Aleppo, so I can go back to my family, my friends, my everyone. Today is 3.5 years since I left my place, since I left my family. I moved from Aleppo to the Kurdistan region of Iraq, to the Kurdistan region, in northern Iraq. But in order for me to go from Aleppo to that region, I had to cross Syria. I had to cross Raqqa, I had to cross Aleppo, I had to cross, al-Hasaka. Most of these places were under the radical group control. So, for example, I was getting to an ISIS checkpoint, with a fake ID and fake everything. I get to the checkpoint, I look at the flag, I know that these are ISIS. I praise them, you're the Muslim, you're doing a great job, blah, 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 blah. Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi is fantastic. So they became very happy and with me. So they allow me to cross. I get to Jabhat al-Nusra, Al-Qaeda checkpoint. I look at the flag, I know these people are Jabhat al-Nusra, Osama bin Laden was great, the Mujahideen are doing a fantastic job, blah, 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 blah. So became very pleased with me. They allow me to cross. I got to an Assad checkpoint. I look at the flag, I know that this is Assad. I change the narrative. Assad is doing a great job. He is killing these bastards, these Mujahideen, or these terrorists, Then I cross. I got to a Kurdish checkpoint because I'm Kurdish. I speak the language, so my tongue was my passport. I crossed to the Kurdish region of Iraq. There I joined the United Nations. There in late 2012. I worked for UNICEF there as a communication for development consultant. I was working for the Syrian Refugee crisis response there. It was very difficult for me because thousands of these people, Syrian refugees, they managed to get, after fleeing the knives, after fleeing the bombardment, the shelling, the siege, the hunger, they got to the border. And what happened, these people, the host communities, the governments, they were getting these people into like buses and taking them to the refugee camp in the middle of the desert. They were dumping them there, surrounded by a fence, and they're surrounded by the army. These people were living in a very difficult situation, especially in Iraq. I was in Iraq, during the winter, it's freezing. And in the winter, it's about 52 degrees. Imagine if you're a family with an average 5-6 members, you're living in a small tent, there's no privacy. There's no privacy for any of you. When a country, for example, in Turkey or other countries, you do not speak the language. You children go to school, it's a different country, it's a different language, a different curriculum, and on the top of that, you're not allowed to work, You're sitting there in a small tent, you can't do anything. And at the end of that, like late 2014, the UN, the WFP, they started carrying the food parcels for these people. There's no money, because at that time they had the Yemen crisis, they had the Ebola crisis, so the money were like going in different places, and people, the donors, they got fed up. Syria. Everyone is talking about Syria, I was working there, and I remember like in 2014, in June, when suddenly the city of Mosul fell for ISIS. It was literally within 7 hours, an entire city fell for this radical group. And what happened at that time, according to ISIS mentality, if you're the people of the book, if you're Christian, Muslim, or a Jewish, it's fine, you stay there, but you need to pay the jizya, the tax of being in a Muslim land, But if you're not the people of the book, if you're a Zoroastrian, if you're a Yazidi, you're in a very big trouble. So Muslims, Christians at that time, they managed to flee. But what happened for the Yazidis, they left behind. And they had to go and take refuge in the top of Mount Sinjar, because they were not Muslims. I was there. I remember like thousands of women and children, I'm very sorry. They were trapped on the top of Mount Sinjar. I don't know if you watched the videos, the footage coming from that place, for 1 week. Thousands of women and children, strung at the top of the mountain, no food and no water. I remember, like, the mountain was surrounded by ISIS. There were young people, young men, trying to descend to the bottom of the mountain to fetch water. The people surrounded there. What happened? ISIS, they captured them, they beheaded them, and they just, they just throw their bodies into this water well, so no one can get water.
Where were the ISIS soldiers from?
Sorry?
Where were the ISIS soldiers from?
Different countries, Syrians, Iraqis, Libyans, Saudis, Yemenis, British, Italians, Spanish, Belgium, from all of the world, For 1 week, no food and water. I remember like there were women giving birth to children on the top of the mountain, there is no place, there is no doctors, there is nothing. These children, they were born lifeless. We literally had to just walk away and just throw them without burying them. There's no place to bury them. After 1 week, the army, they started, you know, dropping food and water. The Americans came and they started dropping in food and water for these people after 1 week. I remember there were a group of people so desperate for food and water. When the parachute was failing, you know, they started running towards these food and water. And the parachute, it fell on a group of people. The mother, she was pregnant, she immediately lost her life. And the child, the infant, he was killed. The child, he had his hand amputated, you know. It was so surreal for me, like, seeing this, because I thought, well, we fled Syria to Iraq. I thought, okay, it's over. We're not gonna see this anymore. But it's like, just like going from hell to another hell, you know. The worst part of it, after the siege was broken, over 3 women and children were taken as sick slaves by ISIS. They were taken from, mostly they were Yazidis, you know, because they were not Muslims. And if they're not Muslim, according to their mentality, they can abuse you. You're a slave. They do whatever they want with you. I remember at that time we managed to free over 300 women and children. We literally had to go to the tribes at that time because the government, the UN, they couldn't negotiate with these people. It's illegal. So we went to the tribes, we gave them the money, and these tribes went to these people. You go and you buy a girl or a woman for $100, $200, $300 or euros according to her age, if she's beautiful or not, you know. I remember in one particular case, there was one girl, a Yazidi Kurdish girl. Her name was Huda. Her family was killed in front of her eyes in a mass grave in Sinjar. She was taken by this, you know, radical group. She was raped more than 60, 70 times by different jihadists, you know. And she was pregnant, you know. We managed to rescue her. She went from Syria to Turkey. From there she flew to Baghdad, and then she came to Erbil when I met her. She was supposed to go to Germany to receive psychosocial support for her, you know, because she was in an awful psychological situation. She went to the hotel in the morning. She was supposed to go to the airport, and in the morning we were informed that she committed suicide. I mean, this is one of the tens of thousands of stories, of untold stories of why people are coming to Europe. They're coming to Europe. You know, globally, today, there are over 65 million refugees across the globe. 65 million, you know, people, they were forced out of their homes. And out of these 65 million, only 1 million, they made it to Europe. And we hear all these fuss about they're coming, they're invading us, they're taking over the country, they're taking over the continent. It's not the same, it's not the case. I mean, if you look in Syria, for example, the neighboring countries, you know, the majority of Syrian refugees are literally living near the Syrian border, because they're hoping that one day soon the conflict would come to an end, so they can go back to their families, their friends. I mean, why would someone who was born in Syria, in Damascus, or in Aleppo, he would leave his family, his friends, his memories, his everything behind, you know, risk his life, put it in a dinghy, and made it to Germany or Sweden, where he has literally no clue about the culture, the people. Why would they do it? You know, I think a tiny fraction of these people managed to make it to Europe. I mean, for me personally, I moved from Iraq because enough is enough. I started developing like hatred towards human beings, you know, after fleeing Syria and everything to Iraq. Then I moved to southeast of Turkey. I thought, okay, I'll end up here, things are fine. 2 weeks later, the problems between the Turkish government and the PKK started. It was literally like Aleppo. Barrel bombs, you know, tanks, total, you know, cities, I mean, towns totally destroyed of the conflict between the Turks and the government, the PKK, you know, rebels, or whatever they called. I decided enough is enough. At that time, 2 years away from my family, I couldn't get in touch with them, I couldn't get them out of the town. I decided to make it to the UK. I moved to Izmir. There I met a smuggler who wanted to go to the UK. The way that these people work, the mafia, they work, is just unbelievable. Super intelligent, super, you know, organized people. They got a structure laid. They have hotels, they've got cars, they've got passports, they've got everything. Even they bribe the police, the army, the coast guards, they bribe everyone. They got a business going. You know, last year, according to one of the statistics, over 500 million euros only in Turkey from the smuggling, you know, the smuggling networks. I met a smuggler. We agreed he will smuggle me to Greece. We agreed it'll be a boat with 24 people. When we came, because I did not trust him, he didn't trust me, we had to find a third-party person to give the deposit, the money, you know. The third-party person turned to be the smuggler's best friend. You know, he's running a small shop, a small bar. I went to him, I said, well, I'm traveling with John the smuggler. He said, okay. I gave him the money, and he takes like a 50 euros as a commission, and he gave me a 4-secret digit code. He said, when you land in Greece, you call me, and you give me this 4-secret digit code, so I hand over the money to John the smuggler. I said, okay. I gave him the money, he gave me the 4-secret digit code, you know, code. We went to the point in the middle of the night. It turned out to be a dinghy with 88 people. Half of them, they were women and children. So we said, oh, what was it? Well, this is cheating. There was an Iraqi man and child and women, and they said, this is cheating, we're gonna call the police. The smugglers came, they started beating him with their weapons, you know. He was bleeding in front of his wife and child. They were even beating the child. We were all jammed into this dinghy, you know, middle of the night. We were in the middle of the sea. The dinghy, before we set off, it was leaking. We were all panicked, we were crying, you know. For me it was fine, I'm a young man, I can swim. Even if it goes down, I can swim. But for me, witnessing, you know, see, women and children, I said, okay, if the dinghy goes down, I can help 1, 2, probably 3 children. I cannot help everyone. We were so lucky. After like 3 hours, we landed in Kos Island in Greece, you know. And the idea, I mean, the reason why I refused, I've rejected the idea of getting my wife with me out of Aleppo. I couldn't, but thinking of it was next to impossible. For me, I was very, very happy, and it's not selfish, by the way. If you're in this situation, it's not selfish at all. I was very happy for me, for my wife, for my child, to get killed by a shrapnel or a sniper just in 1 minute, and that's it, and they lose their life, than witnessing what happened to my friend when he went from Syria to Libya. When he crossed from Libya to Italy, in the middle of the sea, in the Mediterranean, you know, the dinghy went down. When he and his 5 women and, you know, and 5 children and wife, he witnessed, he saw them in his eyes going down. 4 children in front of his eyes, you know, they drowned his pregnant wife. For me, it was next to impossible. For me, it was, we are dead anyway. You know, it was next to impossible to put my wife in that dinghy. I made the journey. I made it to Kos Island. Then I moved to Athens, the mainland. And again, I had to find another smuggler to continue my journey, because I had an objective to get to the UK. I had 2 reasons at that time. I'll tell you later what they were my reason to get to this country. I got to Athens. I had to find another smuggler. I went to the social media on Facebook and Twitter. There's so many advertisements there. They advertise the numbers, the journeys, the prices, the discounts, and everything. They promote it on the social media. So I found one smuggler who was very famous. I called him, and he said, well, you can't come like this. You need to book an appointment to meet me. I said, okay, well, I'm sorry, I don't know that. So I called him, you know, I booked an appointment after 2 days. I came to the place, it was like literally like this, as a bar. In the back of the yard, there was a small office. There were like dozens of people queuing to meet him. Then my turn came. I walked into that bar, you know, the back of the office. He came with a suitcase full of passports. English, British, Indian, Pakistani, Turkish, Italian, all kind of passports. The smuggler, you know, that guy was super intelligent. He was a young man, you know. He told me, okay, do you speak any Russian? I said, I don't speak any Russian. He said, do you speak any Spanish? I said, sorry, I don't. He said, what the hell do you speak? Well, I said, I speak Arabic, I speak Kurdish, I speak some English. He said, okay, English works. That guy was super intelligent. He drew the map of Athens International Airport in front of my eyes. And I said, you come from here, you enter from here, you scan your boarding, you check, you cross the German control. I said, well, this is Athens. What the Germans are doing there? Because the Germans control, they introduced their own control inside the airport because they were so pissed off by the Greek. They were allowing everyone to come and fly to Europe, come and fly. So they introduced their own control to stop the flow of people, you know. I said, okay, let me go change, shave, and walk. I got the passport, the ticket, I paid the money again to a third-party person, which is the smuggler's best friend, you know. I went there, I scanned my boarding, I walked. My ticket was to Marseille, in France. I got there, I scanned my boarding, I walked down, security and everything. I was waiting for my airplane, you know, to come to Marseille in France. I was waiting inside the waiting lounge when the police, the Germans came from the main entrance downstairs and they started checking people's faces. For me, I was so scared. If you're from the Middle East or Africa, they can easily recognize you. You know, you're not European. It's different. So they caught 5 Syrians. I don't know where they took them, and they disappeared. 1 minute later, one of these Germans came from behind and told me, "Okay, show me your passport." Inside, I was dead. For the first time in my entire life, you know, inside a European passport with a fake ID and with the fake everything, you know. If you're in that situation, you're not gonna be fine at all. Anyway.
Sorry, it's my
No, you know, but it's awful. I showed it to him, and we had to communicate in English because I'm Bulgarian according to the passport. You know, it took me 2 days to memorize the name and the details. It was a very difficult name, you know, and the details of that guy. And he was German. He told me, "Okay, Mr. Qadirov Muhammadov." The guy's name was Qadirov Muhammadov. He told me, "Where are you going?" I said, "I have my girlfriend in Marseille." I just had to come up with this idea. I don't have a girlfriend there, but I just had to make up the story. And she's waiting for me there, and we are celebrating our anniversary. Is there any problem, sir? He looked at the passport, he looked at the ticket, I said, "No, good luck." And I boarded. I did not believe it. The first thing I did when I boarded, I rushed to the toilet. I destroyed the passport. Because the smuggler told me if you land in France with this passport, if the French catch you, you'll be fingerprinted. You will lose the passport, you will lose the money. They will deport you back to Greece. You lose the money, you will lose everything, you know. After 2 hours and a half from Athens to Marseille, I landed in Marseille, and to my surprise, was literally in the street. No police, no border control, nothing at all. I said, why the hell I destroyed my passport? I could use it again to continue my journey to the UK, but it was too late. From there I went to Paris. From Paris, I went to Calais. I spent 2 weeks in Calais. They were the worst days of my entire life. I've been to refugee camps in Lebanon, in Jordan, in Turkey, in Iraq, but I never came across a place like Calais, you know. I mean, it's unbelievable. In the heart of Europe, there's a place called Calais with thousands of people. There's no infrastructure, no food, nothing, no protection, no health facilities, nothing at all, you know. 2 weeks. Every day chasing cars and lorries and jumping off the fences, smugglers putting in the back of cars with food and vegetable and chips and crepes, you know, freezing with vegetables and meat, you know, containers. The last night in Calais, and a smuggler from Egypt, he put me in a tanker full of bread, flour. He said, 2 hours and you'll be in London. You have your dinner in London. I said, okay. Fantastic, yeah. It was me and other 7 people. We had to, you know, slip through the whole of the tanker. We were literally like singing in flour. You know, when the smuggler walked away, he had to lock the door of that tanker. You know, total darkness. There was no air. I turned on my mobile. There's no reception. There's no GPS. There's nothing. After 5 hours, it's supposed to be 2 hours. After 5 hours, covered in you know, in flour. You can't see anything. All you breathe is flour. Everything in your mind, in your ear, in your mouth, in your nose, everything is flour. The tanker started moving, you know, after 5 hours. After 9 hours, you know, we all started suffocating. It was me and other 7 people. One of them, there was a child, you know. We closed our eyes. We started crying like children. We started knocking and knocking and knocking. The driver didn't listen, you know. We were literally crying. You know, I closed my eyes. I was like literally crying like a child. I said, I gave up. I said, like, this is gonna be the last minute of my life. I closed my eyes. I just had only one dream, only one wish before I lose my life. I just to meet my mother, my daughter, my wife, just for 1 minute before I die, you know. After like 9 hours, the driver stopped. He let us out of that tanker. We were near the Italian border. It was the wrong car, the wrong driver, the wrong everything. The smuggler was lying, you know. I was so furious. Well, I don't know. I didn't have an option, but I had to put my faith in that one because everyone let us down. The governments, everyone. You know, we didn't have an option but to trust a criminal. We went back then to Calais. From there, I moved to Germany. From Brussels to Germany, Stuttgart then to Hamburg. From there, I moved to Denmark. And in Denmark, I met another smuggler. He put me in the back of a car in a small Porsche, and from there, I made it to the UK in Hull. Took me about 2 months. I don't know if you got the video here to show it before I go on. No. Yeah, please. I mean, the journey, I documented all the journey. It's a 3-hour documentary by the BBC called Exodus, our journey to Europe. It was an awful, awful journey. Hopefully, it's like this a 5-minute clip.
I'm so excited, I'm so happy. You know, I'm literally over the moon. I'm going to meet my family. It's not easy, it's very good.
From inside the port. I am under one of the lorries, waiting for all the cars to get in so I can sneak.
And the smuggler said maximum the journey, the trip will be about 15 hours and you will be in the UK. And he said, don't move. If you move, they will figure out that there's somebody in the back of the lorry. The first day, the truck, the lorry didn't move. At the end of the second day, the lorry started to move. Then it was totally darkness. We couldn't see anything. After about, I don't know, it was maybe 15 hours, less or more, we had again this emotion, you know, the movement. Then we realized that we've been driven out of the ferry and we started to feel that there's a light, there's sun, there's not any more darkness.
So now we are sitting at home. We just arrived in the UK. We were running out of water, running out of everything. Anyway, this truck was our house for the last 3 days. After almost 2 months from leaving Syria, now I'm in the UK. Now my dream is coming true. So glad, so happy that I made it.
I remember I was walking down the shore, you know, and on the other side was England, was the UK, and this one was France. I was just looking. I mean, on the other side, one day I will be there. Today I'm there, you know, and I made it.
Today, the 10th of October 2015, just got this post. It will be a decision on my asylum. I've been granted asylum in the UK. Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed.
I still don't believe it. I still don't believe it that, like, they're coming. It's so unbelievable. Wow.
Even Heathrow says welcome. Welcome to Heathrow. Everyone is welcome. The flight just landed 2 minutes ago. So now they landed. I don't know how long it will take them to come out of the door. Hey! Hi, Daddy Mama! Dodo, tara, Dodo! Yeah, Daddy Mama!
Yeah, I feel one of the luckiest ones. I feel very lucky. I feel very privileged because I managed to get here. The first, my oldest daughter, you know, the first time I met her, she was 1 year old, and like we met for a couple of weeks. Then we're separated in Iraq because I was in Mosul when the city fell. So it was very difficult. And my second daughter, I met her for the first time when she was 7 months. You know. But I think we had our share from being away. So now they joined me like 6 months ago. They're here. We're fine. Again, it's to be honest. To talk about this crisis. They say Europe is in a crisis. You know, it's not Europe is in a crisis. It's these people who were first to leave their homes, their families, their loved ones. You know. They are these people who are in a crisis, you know. Imagine like the biggest economical, political bloc called the EU, you know. They refuse to take the lead in this. How on earth do you expect Lebanon, Sudan, or someone else to take the lead in this crisis? You know, 65 million people today are global. You know, it's a global crisis, and it needs a global response to it. You know, it's not an easy thing, and it's not going to go away anytime soon. And what makes me angry that a lot of people, especially if you look at the mainstream media, you've got all these politicians coming out and say never again and never again. When you look in Rwanda, you know, 1 million people lost their life within 6 months only. 250,000 women and children were raped within 6 months, you know. When you look in Afghanistan, when you look in Iraq after 2003, you know, and yes, it's very complex. It's not an easy thing, you know. It needs more understanding. It's and again, I think for me, not because I was forced to come here, but we Syrians have been always welcoming, you know. When the Kuwaitis fled their countries, we welcomed them. You know, when the Iraqis fled, we welcomed them. We welcomed the Palestinians when they fled their countries. In 2006, the Lebanese came to our country. You know, we're always welcome. We never ever erected one refugee camp in Syria. There was no single tent in my country. You know, and for me, I think it's always immigration that brings, you know, a lot of opportunities. And for me, I always wanted people to focus on the narrative of hope. It's a crisis, indeed, it's a crisis. But look, Germany, you know. 1 million people, and in 2 or 3 years, all the money that they invested in these people will be regenerated for them. They will take advantage of it. If you look at in Germany after World War II, the country was destroyed. 3 million refugees. They built the country, you know. And today, see Germany, they're on the top of the world when it comes to the economy and everything, you know. And I think it's an opportunity for everyone. And if you look again, I think even in the UK, in Germany, you've got the smartest, the people who want to fight for their lives and for their future. Super intelligent, you know, doctors, engineers, everyone who got a hope, a dream, something to achieve, they managed to make it, or they managed to get it to the UK or to Europe, you know. And I think it's an opportunity. And I really hope that the narrative changes, because it's a shame, it's a big shame that today, for example, in the UK or in America, or even in Austria, even like after Brexit, an entire, you know, election could be won
on the subject of migration. It's a big shame that, you know, Nigel Farage was standing on the big banner of refugees behind of him, you know, that you can win an entire election of just they are coming or these people are coming, you know. I think at the end of the day it was a humanitarian crisis. It's a humanitarian crisis which was manipulated and became a political, it's been used by politicians. So I really hope that one day the war would come to an end in my country, especially in Aleppo, which is today has been targeted by more than 150 air raids. Yesterday over 120 people lost their lives. Half of them were children, you know. I really hope that one day the conflict would come to an end and I would be able to talk to you in a bar or in a cafe in Aleppo and to have you all there as very dear guests. Thank you very much.
Can you take some questions?
I would be very happy, yeah.
Yeah, if anybody wants to make questions,
please feel whatever question you want. So, no offense at all.
What do you think of religion? Come on. I mean, realistically, all of this, which is a horrendous situation globally, is caused by the governments manipulating religion, programming people with facts that are garbage, and everybody is revolting because they've had enough.
To be honest, I'm not a religious person.
Good, that's fair enough, because you couldn't be in your
To be
situation.
honest,
You dare not.
because for me personally, you know, if you look at the Middle East, not even me, so for example, even in the UK, in America, all over the globe, I mean, it's a big problem.
Yeah, of course it is. America takes religion seriously, and they're very powerful people. They bomb everybody, they kill everybody in the name of bloody God. How many people have died? Sod the bastards. Excuse me, I'm angry. I'm going out to smoke.
Yeah.
Sodding
Which
world.
is the best thing to do.
Love you, brother.
Cheers. Yes, please.
I just wanted to ask about who actually gets to make it to the UK, because I guess although nobody who's coming to the UK is in a position of privilege, some people have language skills, some amount of money that they can pay smugglers, they might have an education, they might have a profession, all those kind of things, they might have contacts, all those kind of things help, and it seems that the most vulnerable people, which are the ones, you know, if you accept that not everybody can be helped, in the sense that not everybody can come to Europe, is it the people who are most in need of help, the most vulnerable, that are being able to make it, and if not, how do we try to make it the most vulnerable, the most in need to have
I mean,
opportunities?
I really don't think so, because you still got very rich people, you know, you've got really intelligent and smart. A lot of people, they reject the idea of being called or labeled a refugee, you know. That's why they're living near the country, near the borders, you know, because they want to go back, you know. And I mean, probably the ones who had money or contacts, or even like the languages. For me, I had two reasons. I knew that some people were going to ask me why you came to this country. I had two reasons why I chose in the UK. The first reason why I wanted to come to this country, that I spoke some English, which could save me 2, 3, probably 4 years learning German or Swedish. And within these 2, 3 years, I could establish myself. I could do something. I don't want to lose 3, 4 years of my life, you know, learning a Danish language, which only few people speak it, you know. And within these 4 years, I can do something with it, you know. And the second reason was the family reunion scheme. The UK has got the quickest, the fastest family reunion in the entire world. And this is the good thing about it. I was speaking about it a lot, and now soon the Conservatives are just gonna scrub it as well. So, to be honest, if they told me that the Mozambique or Nicaragua would give me the asylum and give me the family reunion visa within 2, 3 weeks, I would have gone to Mozambique or go to Afghanistan if they would give me this. But I came to the UK because I had reason. I studied, I researched it, I found it. I had friends already made it. And you've seen, my family, they managed to get here. I had a friend now who is living in Denmark. He's been 3 years waiting for the family reunion, you know. And in that country, in Syria, 1 minute, only 1 minute, could change the entire life of you. Imagine 3 years, you know. So that's why I've chosen to come to this country.
Every second agony, right? Shoot.
I have a question about, I don't know if you have an answer to this, but for me it's surprising that the English authorities or the UK authorities know very well that the people who are in Calais want to come over here. So whatever the criteria are for qualifying as a refugee or an economic migrant, why does it take forever to, you know, go there and process their request, whereas it seems that in your case, once you were already here, it took a couple of months.
Okay.
I don't know if there is something that you don't want to tell, but
very
it's amazing. I mean, you're here, and after 3 months, they've processed and they have accepted you. 7,000 people are there. Why don't they send just
the law? There is a very complex legal thing called the Dublin 1, the Dublin 2, and the Dublin 3. The Dublin 1, well, the Dublin Agreement, which says this is the UK government. So you are in France, you are in Greece, you should claim asylum there. And this is like the same with Italy, with France, Spain, and you know, these countries have been, you know, they got their own internal problems, economical problems, and they're suffering. And you've got these Western, you know, Northern Europeans sitting on the back of they're doing nothing. They just, because of the Dublin Agreement, which states that the first land, the first EU country you put your leg in, you are entitled to. But the UK government says, once you get to the UK, then you have the right to seek asylum. Once you're out of our territory, then we can't do anything with you.
Yeah, but the agreement between the UK and France is that the UK border is in Calais. That's why now the mayor of Calais is saying, no, you take back your own border because we don't want these people here, because these people don't want to stay in France. They want to come to the UK, which would be normal, I'd say. I mean, the border, the UK border is in the UK.
To be honest,
so I think they're playing on this.
Of course they're playing, because I was at the parliament, you know, I've met some members, some lords and some MPs, and they told me, well, suppose we go today, we go to Calais, and there are a lot of people moaning that there are 300 children there, and we go tomorrow, we get them in a coach, and we bring them back in the UK, you know. This means that the traffickers and the human smugglers, the next day they will have 600 children coming instead of them. And if we bring them there, then it will be 1,000. And this is where they're coming from, you know. And they say, we don't want...
that's just an excuse, obviously. I mean, this is what Cameron said, but obviously it's just an excuse. We don't want to foster human trafficking. Yeah, nobody wants that, but I mean, these children...
Well, yeah, I mean, it's just, again, I think it's just political. For example, Canada. I was in Brussels last week, when I met like a person from the State Department, the Canadian State Department. They said, we've taken 29,000 Syrians within 90 days.
Yeah, they were
within 90 days.
The
UK,
cities,
the UK government, they pledged 20,000 people within 5 years.
Yeah, I know that.
And so far they managed to get only 2,000 something. And they're gonna just drop that pledge as well, because...
So if you are on the UK territory, even if you entered illegally, because you entered illegally, you are entitled to ask for asylum, and they process your request very quickly.
They do it. They do it if you had a reason. I mean, for example, for me, I had an obvious reason why I was coming.
But I mean, I'm not going into the, you know...
Of course, because this is the thing. Once you're in
I'm talking
EU...
about the procedure, which is...
It's a very complex, by the way. It's very complex. And, well, again, to be honest, even if you look at the media, you know, talking about Syrian refugees has become the fashion.
Yeah, I know that.
You know, you've got Eritreans, you've got the Sudanese, you've got the Afghanis, you've got the Iraqis. I mean, for me, I think the Iraqi situation is much worse than the Syrian, to be honest, in some parts of Iraq. Awful situation. But it's a political. I mean, if they grant asylum for an Iraqi person, it will be a huge embarrassment for them. You know, even for an Afghani, because they say, well, yeah, Afghanistan is safe, Iraq is safe. Well, it's not safe. It's hell of a place. So it's political, to be honest.
And financial. Cameron resigned, gave everybody an honour, back to about 10 billion and sodded off. Raised everybody muppet.
And yeah, one question also is,
you know, there's mainstream media, and we are European. I'm Italian. Some other people are British. So we kind of have always this idea that it's all about US and then or the Russians, or it's the Western countries and Eastern or China. From a Syrian refugee point of view, after so many years, you say that at one point you were just in between. There were ISIS against you, and then there was even the Russians against you, and then the Americans against you. So after so many years, what's your idea of actually what's going on? Why this war in Syria, and not who has caused that? Because when you talk about who caused that, it's always so many people. It's not just one country or one group of power. Why did this happen?
To be honest, at the end of the day, every group, every political group, every party, the aim of it is to get to power.
Yeah.
Is to get to
power. And make lots of money.
If I make it, if they can, you know, seduce you and they make it peaceful, they would do. At the end of the day, it's a matter of power, you know. I mean,
yeah, and
Syria,
for
example, you know, Syria had a very strategic position for the Russians because it's the last communist. No, it's not communist, but the last socialist communist, you know, place in the entire Middle East, and they won't give it up for their own life. You know, now the Russians, they are there, and the other way, like the Americans, they want their share of the pie. You know, the Turks, they want their share of the pie, the Syrian pie. The Jordanians, they want it. It's a very, very complex. It's a political.
So the emperor was just to destroy. I mean, to dismantle the nation, the country.
I mean, if you look today, we are living in the 21st century. You know, when you see 500,000 people murdered within 5 years, and you got all these politicians posting and talking about everything. You know, like 2 weeks ago, I was in a conference in Belgium when everyone was going there, the Europeans and Americans, and everyone was like, we want to talk about technology and how technology can help the refugees and you know the refugee crisis. And I don't look for a Syrian point of view. You know, we see technology. Sometimes we perceive technology as an enemy because at that country, the way that our experience with technology was, you know, smart missiles, smart drones, smart everything, you know, even smart bullets which can go travel from a city to city and get to one person and kill him, which is very complex. You need to understand the culture, the history. It's not like this, you know, it's a very complex, and I am serious. In 5 years, I still can't understand this. It's a very complex. The Middle East is a very complex, and you have all these international powers, the Americans, the Europeans, the Turks, the Qataris, the Saudis, with their own agendas, with their own interests, you know. And what happened was like a systematic brutalization process of people. Today, you know, I mean, for me personally, before 2011, I've never ever imagined that I would see blood in my entire life. I remember in 2012, the first time I saw blood, when I was in Aleppo, when a barrel bomb was dropped by the regime on a small school with 35 children. They were turned into pieces, you know. At that time, when I saw it, I didn't believe it. I had to go literally and put like the parts of the children into bags, you know. But that day, I knew that something human died in me, and it will never ever be back. Imagine like 5 years, children, all they saw was killing, beheadings, blood and blood and blood and blood. What do you think their lives would be?
Like my father's, who grew up just before the Second World War. He was 6 years old, walking down the street when his best friend got blown away by a bomb back. And I grew up with that. I thought, Christ, man, this is a perverse, evil, twisted thing. Governments are doing that around the globe forever, and they have been doing it for thousands of years, man.
Yeah, and again, I think it's very difficult because I think it's colonial. I mean, if we are Syrian, why would someone, a Russian or a British or American, would come out and say, you do this government and you do this? I mean, why you don't just let people mind their own businesses? I mean, we have our own democracy.
Or would you like an international intervention now? Because there are so many parties involved. Would you like potentially an international coalition? come
You
there.
already have the Danish, the British, the Americans,
but
the Australians.
they're not. Yeah.
They already intervened. You know,
Yeah.
yesterday, like, well, 3 days ago, over 100 soldiers they were killed by the Australians, the British, the Americans. You know, you already have the. I mean, to be honest, if you have the international community intervening, you know, a lot of money, a lot of resources, and the situation is not stable. You need to make sure that when you send a peacekeeping person there, that he does not get murdered. You know, there's no.
Okay, but what is the way out for you? Is it international forces, peacekeeping forces?
No,
or what is
well,
it?
for example, if you get to this room, you know, well, if you go to a place, you've got two groups, you know, fighting each other, and you've got behind them someone coming and supplying them with arms, with money, with food. Go and fight each other. You know, they will keep fighting each other till the end of forever. But if you tell them, okay, you should stop, I'll cut the arms. Yemen, for example, this is a very clear example. You know, if I cut the arms, I cut the money, I cut the food for these people, you know, then at the end of the day, like Lebanon, after 15 years, you know, they realize that we need to stop the flow of the arms. We stop it. At the end of the day, if I don't have ammunition, I'll come to the table, I'll sit with you, I'll speak with you. But as long as I have arms in my hand, I won't sit.
Yeah. We're going to see in the narrative that we offer that comes from a point of view when people want to intervene to solve the situation. And what they do is harming people. What we believe is that there are people who do not want the situation to be solved and are behind governments and work across governments.
I mean, to be honest, there are hundreds and thousands of people, companies, corporations, governments. They would love the Syrian crisis to go on because they're benefiting. Aid is benefiting, arms dealers are benefiting, the media is benefiting, everyone is benefiting. Journalists, TV, everyone is benefiting from it. Why would they stop it? It's just like it's a hen which lays golden eggs. Why would they do it? Why would they stop it?
Any more questions before we go on?
What's next for you now?
Okay. Tomorrow I'm starting. I was so lucky that I got a scholarship. Tomorrow I'm starting my master's degree. So it's a master's degree in violence, conflict, and post-conflict development. I'm studying there in the hope that after I finish, hopefully I'll go back to the Middle East and do something. Because I believe that I belong to that place. And if I can't go back to that Syria now, I can go back to Iraq, Turkey, Lebanon, or Jordan to do something there. Thank you.
You guys want to do a quick break before we keep on going? Huh? Maybe
I'd
5
like to go and
minutes.
have a smoke myself.
Piece of cake, orange juice, or syrup. Alright. It was a kind of a tough story, wasn't it? But interesting. Now I'd like to move on and introduce a bit the Roosevelt movement, for those who do know it, who do know us, and what our worldview is and our understanding of what's going on. Let's start by the fact that we are not a political party, but we are a political movement. And we are probably the only political movement that's got the Universal Declaration of Human Rights as the political horizon. So we think that in 1948, when Eleanor Roosevelt and the United Nations signed the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, was a moment of height in terms of development of society. And we strive towards, we want to create a society where there is freedom of speech, freedom of worship, freedom from want, and freedom from fear. Now, what we're going to be talking about is quite heavy, so I would like to invite you to kind of open your minds a bit and do not think anymore in terms of left and right wing, because that's not our starting point. So try and do that. I know that's hard, but let's try and do that. The Roosevelt movement was started in 2015 by 500 founding members in Italy, and it was started by Gioele Magaldi. Joale Magaldi was a high-ranking official, if you want to call it that, of the Grand Orient of Italy, which is the official Masonic organization in Italy. And then he was expelled because he was criticizing very strongly the powers dynamic within the Grand Orient of Italy. He said they were very right-wing, very illiberal, and very anti-democratic. He was kicked out, and he got in touch with international Masonic networks. So there are, you know that at the national level, you've got either the Grand Lodges, like the Grand Lodge of England, which are obediences, or you've got the Grand Orients, like the Grand Orient of Italy. But we're going to see how during the centuries, Masons, the power that Masons used to have has gone international. So there are international Masonic lodges. There are those who hold the power nowadays.
Yeah, they're called government.
But anyways, the point is this. The analysis that we make is that we want to create that word. A word based on human rights, really, and human equality. But the reality is that lately, politics has served economical purposes rather than being a tool for politics to create a fairer society. And that is the big mistake. That is what skewed every political action, because economy came first. But economy is made of number and is not measured in terms of people's wealth and well-being, and that is the problem. Anyways, in his book, Joale Magaldi has wrote 3 books. The first one has been published, was printed 4 times. Now it's being translated in English and in Spanish. And after that book, there were a number of parliamentary investigations about a number of people that he talked about in his book. But basically, what he explains is that history is made by a lot of different realities. First of all, by people. People make history. But then you've got corporations, economical interests. You've got armies. You've got politicians. But there is another level of power which is hidden, which is that of the Eurolodges. Eurolodges are, I said before, that at the national level, you've got the Grand Orients and the Grand Lodge. The Grand Orients and the Grand Lodges, right? At the international level, the Masonic lodges are organized in UR lodges, Euro lodges.
And the Illuminati.
The Illuminati don't exist anymore.
Well,
they used to exist. They don't exist anymore. But I know the first thing that a lot of people tell us, it's a problem. It is a problem that we have, because a lot of people mistake conspiracy theorists with analysis of reality that come from facts. But we live in a world where there are signs for everybody to be seen about the Masonic power. You know, on the $1 note, we've got clearly Masonic symbols there, but everywhere. We've got the Grand Lodge, United Grand Lodge of England, who's in Covent Garden. We know that those powers exist. And we know that there is a big back office of power represented by the secret services. And we know that the secret services can be deviated, can work in the interest of people other than governments. So we shouldn't be surprised to think that organizations that drove most of the liberal revolutions that have built our society, that our society is built on, still have powers. If you look back in the years, if you think about the French Revolution, the French Revolution was born out of French lodges in France. They experimented democracy in between themselves and then wanted to overthrow the power and establish them and create the same society at the national level. If you look at the Independence War, the Independence War was complicated, but France intervened because of the Lodge of the Nine Sisters in France, and they convinced the king to send troops to the United States. The king was not very sure, because they were, of course, Freemasons were fighting against aristocracy, but at the end he was convinced to do that. We know that also that Benjamin Franklin, who was a Freemason, got in touch with Thomas Paine, who wrote the pamphlet Common Sense, who was basically what inspired the rebels in the United States, because nobody perceived the United States as being a country. And Thomas Paine, a Freemason, was invited by Benjamin Franklin, a Freemason, to write that pamphlet so that he could inspire and explain why they had the rights to be free from the United Kingdom. Then the American Civil War, again with Abraham Lincoln, another declared Freemason. We all know he was a Freemason. If we go to Italy, the Italian unification, Garibaldi, Mazzini, they were all Freemasons. It's quite naive to think that people who've driven change and who have driven society forward, like the Freemasons, suddenly disappeared. They've simply moved from working at the national level to working at an international level. But Freemasons are not the same. Most of the liberal revolution, we call it a social liberal revolution, were done by Freemasons, the revolution we've seen. But within Freemasonry, like in the government, if we talk about the Italian government, we know that there are left-wing parties, right-wing parties, liberal parties, socialist parties, the Christian parties. Same thing is with Freemasons. Freemasonry is like a religious organization, if you wanted to. And within that, there are a lot of different people, organizations, who've got different ideas of society, even under a philosophical point of view. So you've got conservative lodges, and you've got reformist lodges. So the reformist lodges believe in the French motto, the freedom, equality, and fraternity, right? The conservative lodges, I don't want a society equal for everybody, indifferent. The conservative lodges believe in freedom, equality, and fraternity amongst Freemasons. So they perceive themselves as having the right to rule a horde of sheep. Right? And they've been since the 20th century, whereas until the 19th century, the progressive lodges were much stronger than the conservative lodges. In the 20th century, these conservative lodges start gaining a lot of power. And the 20th century is a mess. There are terrible experiments like the Nazism and fascism. We know that Churchill, who was another declared Freemason, financed fascism at the beginning. And then, of course, he understood the mistake they had done. But it was really a mess. And we can maybe organize another meeting to talk about what happened in the 20th century. But what's important is that that there are different lodges, like you've got the Three Eyes, Gebura, a number of conservative lodges that fight against a number of progressive lodges, like the Thomas Paine. Then in 1992, something happens. George Bush loses the election. But so you know that usually presidents manage to get power twice in their career. So George Bush did his first mandate, and then he's lost the support of the Masonic lodges, both progressive and conservatives. And that is because in 1981 there was a pact between progressive and Masonic lodges where they devised a plan for ruling the world, actually, together. But anyway, he lost consensus, and in 1992, between 1992 and 1994, he founded the Ator Pentalpha. Ator Pentalpha was a secret Ur lodges that the other lodges did not know about until 2000. That was a radical conservative Masonic lodge. So they thought that human beings were subjects, but they also had this idea that the herd could be steered through violence. And there are and they managed to recruit quite a lot of people. If you think about al-Baghdadi, McCain, Osama bin Laden, Erdogan, they are all people who belong to the Ator Pentalpha, this Masonic lodge. how Masonic lodges work, these Masonic lodges, is not like by being represented in one party or another. They work across parties. They look after their own interests, and they've got infiltrates in different organizations. But anyway, as I said, in 2011, George Bush Jr. becomes President of the United States of America. And this is what happens in 2011. We've got the first big act of terrorism on Western ground, which is attributed to a Middle Eastern power. Now, the reason why they want to do that, so what is the ultimate aim of conservative lodges in general? That is of going back to a new form of aristocracy. So Masonic lodges during the 18th and 19th century fought against aristocracy, but they still believe that there needs to be an aristocracy in power. It's not the aristocracy of blood, but it's the aristocracy of spirit. It's Freemasons that they think should be in power. So democracy is something that really didn't go down with them. And what they're trying to do is to drive a democratic involution in society. So things like the Patriot Act are the things that they are trying to achieve. So they want people to demand to have strong leader. They want people to demand to have to renounce to their own rights, like privacy, for the sake of safety. And that was one of the first things that happened. And then in 2011, but okay, this is just to give you a bit of a background. And then we come to 2011 and Syria. Bit of background on Syria. In 1971, al-Assad Sr. became president. He was a member of the Ba'ath Party. He was actually the Minister of Defense. He took power and he westernized the country. He wanted, as a Ba'ath parties are nationalist and socialist. So he wanted a like society, so non-religious society. But he behaved as a dictator. He used the power to hold the power. Then in 2000, his son went into power, Bashar al-Assad. And there were a lot of expectations about him to create really a democratic state, because he had studied in the UK, he was a child of the Western world. But things went a bit differently. Let's see what mainstream media tell us about it.
Syria's war is a mess. After 4 years, the conflict is divided between 4 different sides on the ground. Each side has different foreign backers, and those foreign backers don't even agree with one another about who they're fighting for or who they're fighting against. To understand all this, the crisscrossing interventions, the moving battle lines, it helps to go back to the beginning of the war and watch how it unfolded. The first shots in Syria's war are fired in March of 2011 by Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad against peaceful Arab Spring demonstrators. In July, some of the protesters start shooting back, and some Syrian troops even defect from Assad's army to join them. They call themselves the Free Syrian Army, and the uprising becomes a civil war. Extremists from Syria and from around the region start traveling to join the rebels. Assad actually encourages this by releasing jihadist prisoners to tinge the rebellion with extremism, make it harder for foreigners to back them. In January of 2012, Al-Qaeda forms its new branch in Syria called Jabhat al-Nusra. Also around then, Syrian Kurdish groups, who've long sought autonomy, take up arms and de facto secede from Assad's rule in the north. That summer is when Syria becomes a proxy war. Iran, which is Assad's most important ally, intervenes on his behalf. By the end of 2012, Iran is sending daily cargo flights and has hundreds of officers on the ground. At the same time, the oil-rich Arab states on the Persian Gulf began sending money and weapons to the rebels, mainly to counter Iran's influence and mainly through Turkey. Iran steps up its influence in turn in mid-2012 when Hezbollah, which is a Lebanese Shia group backed by Iran, invades to fight alongside Assad. The Gulf states respond by sending even more money and weapons to rebels, Saudi Arabia really leading the effort at this point. and this time going a lot through Jordan, who also opposes Assad. And by 2013, the Middle East is divided between generally Sunni powers on one side supporting the rebels, and Shias on the other side supporting Assad. That April, the Obama administration, horrified by Assad's atrocities, signs a secret order authorizing the CIA to train and equip Syrian rebels. But the program stalls out at first. At the same time, the US quietly urges the Arab Gulf states to stop funding extremists, but their requests go ignored. In August, Assad uses chemical weapons against civilians in the town of Ghouta.
Men, women, children lying in rows, killed by poison gas. It is in the national security interests of the United States to respond to the Assad regime's use of chemical weapons through a targeted military strike.
Russia proposed on Monday that Syria surrender control over its chemical weapons to the international community for its eventual dismantling to avoid a U.S. military strike.
The US ends up backing down, but the whole thing establishes Syria as a great powers dispute, with America against Assad and Russia backing him. Just weeks later, the first American training in arms through that CIA program finally reached Syrian rebels. The US is now a participant in the Syrian war. In February of 2014, something happens that transforms the war. An al-Qaeda affiliate, mostly based in Iraq, breaks away from the group over internal disagreements over Syria. The new group calls itself the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, and it becomes al-Qaeda's enemy. ISIS doesn't fight Assad. Instead, it fights the other rebels and it fights the Kurds, carving out a mini-state in Syria that it calls its caliphate. And that summer, it marches across Iraq, seizing territory and galvanizing the world against it. Then, in September, almost exactly 1 year after it almost bombed Assad in Syria,
we're moving ahead with our campaign of airstrikes against these terrorists, and we're prepared to take action against ISIL in Syria as well.
That summer, the Pentagon launches its own program to train Syrian rebels. But unlike the CIA program, this one will only train rebels who fight just ISIS, not Assad. And the program fizzles out, showing that America now opposes ISIS more than Assad, but also that there's really no like-minded force on the ground in Syria. In August, Turkey begins bombing Kurdish groups in Iraq and in Turkey, even as Kurds are fighting ISIS in Syria. Turkey also doesn't bomb ISIS in Syria. All of this deepens tension with the US over this question of whether they need to treat Assad or ISIS the primary enemy, and creates a lot of confusion among the Kurds about where the US stands. Now, Assad has been losing ground all this time, to ISIS, to the rebels, and in September of 2015, Russia intervenes in his behalf. Russia says it's there to bomb ISIS, but in fact it just bombs the anti-Assad rebels, including some rebels who are backed by the US. So as it stands now, there are lots of different groups and outside countries involved in Syria's war, and even among allies there are big disagreements about who their enemies are, who to support, and how to do it. And those contradictions are a big part of why, for this war, there is just no end in sight.
Right, there is a lot of true facts there, but they show what we know about what's going on, what the media tell us. For example, if we think about, for example, the way Erdogan behaved, Erdogan has been clearly supporting ISIL on the territory by giving them supplies, by stopping the fighters against ISIS. But we need to understand why he's doing that. We said that he belongs to the Outer Pentalpha. He belongs to that lodge that wanted that George Bush started. Now, in order for us to get on the same page, I would like to ask you whether you can tell me what was going on in 2011 outside of Syria.
Yeah, the Russians were in lots and lots of heroin, and they were shipping.
It was the Arab Spring, right? So the Arab Spring across all the countries from Tunisia, Libya, Egypt, as Ahmad was saying. But there is something that all of those conflicts have something in common. Try and think about the way that those conflicts started and how they ended up. Can you tell me who started those revolutions, usually, in each of those countries? People? What type of people?
Yeah.
Huh? Students? It was liberal revolutions that wanted democracy. That is why a lot of powers did not recognize what was really going on. When I talk about the the progressive Masonic lodges and the different powers did not understand what was going on. So all of the Arab revolution started with groups of students trying to overthrow the power to gain democratic changes. And then as soon as they managed to destabilize the situation, something happened in all of those countries. Extremists, with very, very well funded, managed to take over the revolution and install a state of fear in all of those countries, all of them, not one of them, in all of them, which is a bit suspect. And the reason is that they were not working. These it's like it's just blowing smog in the eyes of your enemy. They were all excuses to create to destabilize the area, create the Islamic State, and start creating a state of fear in Western world, in the Western world, and then start with terrorism to increase that fear and start that demand that led in the United States to the demand for less rights, like the patriarchy. It's all about an involution of democracy. It's all about strong leaders that can actually take control of the situation rather than real democracy. That is the thinking that these people want to do. In this environment, you have Obama. Obama belongs to the MAT, is a Masonic lodge that has seen, again, after what happened with the Atorment Alpha, conservative and progressive Freemasons come together. And they decided that they had to stop the Atorment Alpha. They had to stop the people who were using violence to create this new state of emergency at a global level. And they voted. They agreed on Obama. Obama, we all know, was a follower of Brzezinski. Brzezinski was a member of the 3I. So it was a person chosen by that establishment. Obama won the Nobel for Peace before even becoming president, and his whole mandate was about not intervening. He had to create a kind of a difference. The United States in 2001 were perceived as the colonialist everywhere in the world. So when he came to power, he had to change that perception that Bush created, and that's why he decided never to intervene with boots on the ground. But that politics of non-intervention proved to be quite unsuccessful in Syria. So what you have is that in all of those countries, the same things happened. There were revolutions that led to extremists to take power. If you think about even Egypt, there has been a second revolution because the extremists managed to take power and then they were overthrown, because there is a very strong tradition of liberal Masons in Egypt. But that is the situation, how this is what happened in terms of this is the process through which they wanted to create the Islamic State. Syria is very likely to become the next Palestine, unfortunately, because there are too many people, too many parties involved. On one side you've got Putin. Putin belongs to a conservative Masonic lodge, which is called the Golden Eurasia. That does not like this type of, it does not like to engineer society using terrorism, but that doesn't stop him from taking benefit of what's happening there. So what Putin is doing really is looking for a strong leader in the area. Afghanistan was always an ally of Russia. The Assad family was always a strong ally of Russia, and they are happy with that. The conservatives from the United States would be happy with someone like Assad, but they cannot support him because they've condemned him. They've condemned him shooting on the people. On the other side, there are a lot of progressive forces that would like a change, would like the United Nations, someone to really bring democracy in there. But that is not what countries like Russia want. So there is a big tension there. And nowadays, if you talk to people who are in touch with these powers, will tell you that there is no vision for what's going to happen in Syria. And that's why the only thing that we hope is that there will be an international intervention where there is no single nation kind of taking stakes in it, but with the real aim of creating democracy, the democracy that Bashar al-Assad was meant to create in Syria. And this is our analysis of what's going on and a brief overview of the conservative and progressive methodologies that were involved in the Syrian conflict. Any questions? Yes.
So we've seen recently from Obama's, votes, the latest, UN meeting here, different attitude, from the president itself, kind of, really, probably for the very first time, since his first and second mandate, to push, the international community for action on Syria, to make group from a military point of view, of course, with the NATO, to try to, to fix, the situation. But of course, we all know Obama's time, is over, in a few months. We go a really, intense internal debate in the US between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. So, your personal opinion and also, your view as, Roosevelt movement, in case of, Trump get to the White House, what do you think, the United States, attitude, is going to be towards, the conflict? And at the same time, if, Hillary Clinton would say,
Hillary Clinton has promised a change in foreign policy. So Hillary Clinton will most probably intervene. That's what he promised, intervention. That's what she's agreed on. Trump is much more of a buffoon, really, than someone who can really, who's really involved in this dynamic. The election of Trump could have a positive effect, which is that of people going back to appreciating those Rooseveltian policies like that we've seen in the 70s, those Keynesian economical policies that put politics and society at the center of society. Once people really see what his neoliberal, well, in English there is no word between liberalismo and liberismo. Neoliberalism is probably the best word of describing it, which is all the political, the economical theories of Hayek and all of the people from the University of Chicago, very conservative, ultra-capitalists. He's one of those guys. So probably if after a mandate of Donald Trump, people might go back to the traditional liberal values that the United States had after the Second World War. But in terms of intervention, what we know is that that Hillary Clinton would be having a different foreign policy.
I have a question. When you say that you see the solution as an international intervention, what do you mean exactly? Because there's been a lot of international intervention without...
Yeah, that's quite interesting. Yeah.
Because, I mean, what kind of international...
Not a NATO intervention.
No, but you haven't spoken about Saudi Arabia, because if you don't cut the links between Saudi Arabia and ISIS, first of all, you have to get rid of ISIS. That's the... And then you have to pacify Assad and the rebels. But as long as ISIS wants to take the ground, and if Saudi Arabia and the Gulf countries are continuing to support ISIS, it's never going to happen.
It's two different things. One is the role that Saudi Arabia is playing, and that is the tricky bit, because even if you go boots on the ground in that region, there would be a conflict between who's transferring money there, and that's why it's important to understand the difference between governments and the powers behind governments.
Absolutely.
There is a power behind the government that involves Turkey and Arabia that actually wants that situation to be like it is. If the United States as a country get involved, say, that will create a friction between powers that are internal of the United States and have been actually facilitating this fund. So that is a bit of a that is a critical situation, the relationship with Arabia. But on the other side, when I talk about NATO, in NATO there are a lot of anti-democratic, really powerful people. If you think about even Angela Merkel, who belongs to the, according to Joelle Magaldi, belongs to the Golden Eurasia. If you think about, well, let's see what happens to Sarkozy, but Sarkozy belongs to the Ator Pentalpha, the Masonic lodge that we said, so the most conservative Mason. So probably NATO is not actually the right organization to do that, but neither is the United Nations, because the United Nations themselves should transform themselves into a society of democracy, like an organization of democracies that do not allow within themselves countries that do not have democracy within themselves. So this is under, if you want to, if you wanted to daydream about what should happen, should be an evolution of the United Nations into an organization of democracies that can actually intervene in these countries. What we would want is anyway international intervention that is coordinated by forces who want to create democracy on the ground, rather than finding a new powerful leader like Assad or Assad himself.
The thing is also, what do you think about what Ahmad said before? He was talking about the fact that life before in Syria was actually a good life. It was a modern country, powerful, full of educated people, smart people, but it wasn't that democratic like the Western societies. But people there were happier before, and people lived happy in that place. And probably it's the same situation in other places of the world. So when we talk about creating a United Nations of that won't allow democracy, democratic countries, but we should really be careful of what we think is a democratic state at this point. And instead of applying our law to the whole world, and the world is every country is different, you should probably find a different way, which is maybe not called anymore the democratic way. It should be more like a tolerant way, and more tolerant.
Yeah, liberal, social liberal. We call it social liberal society, right?
Yeah, no.
Even like working with the cultures and the working with the cultures and the politics of each place, because not each place, this is my view anyway, that not each place works in the same way. And a kind of democracy that might work in Italy might not work in Germany, or the kind of government that works in one country. Like I think if it's international, it has to definitely have a lot of input by the people who are from, like nearly all input, most input from the people from that country, because every country works differently, and they're not going to work like another country's mode of government isn't going to work everywhere. It's almost like it isn't, but it has an air of colonialism to it unless it's done properly.
I don't think we would want an annihilation of different cultural models. But the society that Bashar al-Assad had before in Syria was exactly the same type of society that conservative Masonic lodges would want. So a society with a very strong leader, people have got no power over the leadership. They're given just the little they need to survive and be happy and have a sofa and a TV and maybe go to school, but without having any decisional power. And this is opposed to a vision of society where society is not fixed, it's not stable. People can rotate in the power ladder and can actually drive change within a country. This is the worldview that we have. We do want to create, to spread. It's like, as I said, the dream after the Second World War. We all were thinking about spreading democracy. That what happened in a lot of places where the United States actually intervened was not actually bringing democracy, was exploiting resources.
Yeah.
What happened in Europe, though, is what should be replicated there. So in a way, create those conditions for society to evolve in a democratic and yet unique way.
Yeah,
because Europe is, thank God, is very, very different from the United States. And the social the welfare state that we've got here, they've never had. And yet, this is the type of project that we should aim towards, bringing democracy without imposing any cultural model that wouldn't destroy their country.
Cool. Also, if you reflect, on an actual intervention from, diplomatic and, from a foreign policy point of view, it's a huge opportunity for a country like the United States, after the disaster made in Iraq, and Afghanistan, following everything after, 9/11, yeah. So, let's suppose Hillary Clinton, will get to the White House and intervention will be made. I think, it would be a key, key moment, even to establish the U.S. as a different, country to everybody's eyes, yeah. If the United States, as the United States, because of course, it's undeniable, they've got the highest, world, than the military, power in a supposed, intervention coordinated with other countries, yeah. But if the United States has really a vision of, okay, we do an intervention, we wipe out, ISIS, but then, let's build something, let's get back to
But that cannot happen.
2011, yeah.
It would never be possible it's tough for the United States really to go there because, and that goes back to your question actually, that is very hard for the United States alone to go there because of the interest that Russia has in the region.
Yeah.
So that's why the region is at risk of becoming new Palestine, because there are a lot of different interests that go in that region. That's why the situation is so complicated. In theory, it's very complicated. It really depends by what the United States would want to do or whoever wants to do. I wouldn't hope for something that's driven by single nation. I think it should be an international effort. There should be an international effort of stabilizing the area. The idea of no nation being involved, like Ahmad was saying, implies that the moment the nations do not get involved, those different powers behind the nations would stop being involved. And that wouldn't happen. They would keep on giving money, they would keep on destabilizing the area. So that is why we actually need stronger governments rather than weaker ones. We need to have governments that have got the initiative and the capacity and the credibility to bring real change there, rather than pulling out.